At this time, I'd like to introduce Andy Buntrock, who's the Vice President of Strategic Planning and Communications, to lead this next panel. Andy?
The storm hit. Conditions were so bad in our territory that we couldn't even get down the roads to see how much damage we had.
We had crews out right away Saturday, and we had roughly 2,000 people out at one point.
Our linemen were first called in at about 4 in the morning. We had lightning near a substation and happened to blow out 2 fuses. And then the day just continued on.
We lost 8 to 10 river crossings of our lines going across the river. And not just the lines going down, these poles were what became the new channel.
We're fortunate to be part of a network of cooperatives. When we have a storm and it's bigger than what we can handle, we call on our neighbors and they come and help us. When they have a storm and we have available resources, we send our resources to help them.
Basin stepped to the plate and was able to help us out. Numerous North Dakota co-ops and South Dakota co-ops came up and helped us restore the system for the membership. If we had to stand on our own, it would have been a much longer fight that we fought, and it would have been more difficult to fight.
I think being a part of a cooperative and our membership understands that they're a part of something, and when they can give back and be a little part of helping give a lineman a lunch to just keep them going an extra hour, I think there's a real sense of pride in that, pride of belonging, pride of being a part of something. And I believe that's part of the cooperative spirit that, you know, our members show and that we're a part of every day.
Welcome, everybody. My name's Andy Buntrock. I'm Vice President of Strategic Planning and Communications for Basin Electric Power. I'll be your moderator today for the How We Serve panel. And essentially the purpose of this panel is to drive out some of what happened in 2022 and how your G&T has provided value to the members. So today I've got a few individuals with me. I've got Troy Tweeten. He's the Senior Vice President of Operations and Chief Operating Officer of Dakota Coal Company and Montana Limestone Company. I also have Dale Johnson, who's the Vice President and Plant Manager at Dakota Gasification Company. I've got Val Weigel, who's the Vice President of Asset Management and Commodity Strategy. And last but not least is the famous Tom Christensen, the Senior Vice President in Transmission Engineering and Construction. So thanks everybody for coming. Appreciate those that you're still here. We'll jump right into the panel here, and there's actually going to be some prizes for hard questions at the end. We will double the amount of your banquet meals, and we will triple the amount of your drink tickets if you ask hard questions at the end. So, Troy, let's start with you. You guys had a great year. The plants ran really well. It sounds like you guys even had some time periods where you were able to save some money for the cooperative. And you guys were running the units very hard. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what happened here in 2022?
Yeah, sure. With the help of all our employees, we were able to increase our revenues and margins a number of ways. And a few examples of that are, you know, we cut some of our maintenance costs by doing more work in-house with our own labor and doing a better job of managing our contracts and awarding those contracts on best value based on the scope of work that was to be done for that contract job. So that was one way. Another way, of course, our plants, as you mentioned, have been running way more than we budgeted all year. And this summer on the west side, we were not only available to run during some real volatile market spikes, but we were also reliable too. And during that time, that helped us keep our costs down to the membership by not having to buy power off the market.
All right, thanks, Troy. You know, I had also heard earlier, I think it was sometime this summer, that you guys were actually trucking some coal over to LOS. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what happened there?
Yeah. In response to some of the rail issues that we're having, and some of that had to do with the union strikes that we're talking about going on at the time, we had some supply issues. Some of that had to do with our conveyor systems that were down at inconvenient times, and some issues that we had there. But we had to find some extra ways to truck the coal to LOS economically, and keep the stockpile up, so that when we would look at running the units, the market had put some stipulations on how low the pile could go, where they would put you in a reserve status. And so we ended up trucking the coal there reliably and affordably to keep our costs down and stay at full capacity.
We had also visited earlier a little bit about some other ways you guys save money out at the plant. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. One of the main ones was at the Dry Fork station, and they have their air quality control system. And during part of construction and commissioning of the plant, they had their lime hydrators that were never fully commissioned. So this plant staff there, they took that as part of the initiative, and they installed, they took the hydrators, and finished that all the logic to get everything running good and performing as it should. And then the next step that they took was on the lime injection rate and putting it into the scrubber. They had to kind of monitor that to the dew point, and dew point, of course, is the temperature at which the water droplets in the flue gas would start to form, and we had to stay above that, otherwise we get corrosion happening in there. Through the whole process of them tuning the hydrators and getting the injection rates correct, they ended up saving about $1 million annually for the cooperative, and it's money that goes back to the membership then.
So one thing we talk about a lot is the importance of the relationship and all the different departments within the cooperative working together. And one of the things that we witnessed earlier this year was a unique opportunity where operations and marketing worked together to sell some of the bottom ash out of LOS. And we have a video here, I think, that we can show that highlights this.
Leolds has a long history of selling some of our products and some of our bottom ash.
In the past, there may have been small amounts of sales when buyers sought out the product specifically from the plant. But there wasn't necessarily a comprehensive sales strategy to execute across the generation fleet.
So the estimated cost per ton of getting rid of anything in our landfill here at Leolds runs between $7 to $8 a ton. Annually, it used to cost us around $800,000 a year to get rid of the ash. And now we're seeing a net benefit of about $1.6 million to the cooperative.
This new arrangement with marketing and the plants has been very beneficial because it really allows the plants to focus on their core activities and not be marketers for byproducts.
The primary use for our bottom ash is it's used for grit blasting. They use it in boilers, they use it for metal cleaning. They take compressed air and they use it to clean all the buildup off the metal to get it back down to bare metal. It's also used in roofing products, shingles, asphalt, and then patching material. And then a smaller use for it is it's actually used in fish tanks.
The big difference between where we were yesterday and where we are today is that today we have marketing acting as a one-stop shop for buyers for coal byproducts from the plants.
Yeah, and then just as
So
they mentioned,
at Dakota Gas, we produce two different streams of.
I was just going to say, one of the things that they mentioned in the film was being able to take that byproduct that we normally had to spend money on to get rid of it, and then we turn it into a revenue source for our membership. So it's a win-win for everybody. It helps save the money at the plants and turn a little bit more revenue back to the members.
Absolutely. Thanks, Troy, and great example of how we're delivering value back to the membership. And let's turn our attention now to Dale. You know, as we all know, DGC has, throughout the years, has done a great job of diversifying their revenue streams, new products. And I think one of those products that we focused a little bit on this year was liquid CO2. And we have a video here that describes that a little bit as well, and then we'll hit Dale with some really hard questions.
So at Dakota Gas, we produce two different streams of CO2. One stream is we send via pipeline. That's around 95% purity. It stays in gas form and is only transported via pipeline to Canada. And a newer stream that we've produced in very recent years is our liquid CO2 stream, which only gets sold into the beverage grade CO2 market.
When designing the urea plant, we knew that the ammonia plant wouldn't have a perfect availability, and so we included the CO2 liquefaction plant and storage to act as a backup to kind of keep the urea plant running in the times that the ammonia plant had to come offline.
It's a unique product stream for us that, I mean, we want to sell the excess we have, but when we need it, we want to make sure that we have as much possible to keep the urea fertilizer going.
DGC has been one of the few plants that has maintained production during the shortage, and we've also have a surplus of it.
We were getting calls from California, from New York, Virginia, Texas, Colorado, all over the U.S. wanting to buy liquid CO2 from us. So it presented us with quite a few new customers and some new opportunities.
We've had people come to us, one of those being a major beverage corporation. We've been approved as a supplier for them. Since
DGC only has truck availability for loading, that does limit us on how far we can go economically. So if, you know, certainly there's customers looking to transload CO2 in certain times of the year, just to get it to where they need it to go.
The nice thing about our beverage grade CO2 is we've been able to meet the customers' demands without having any increased cost to the plant itself. We've always had the ability to make this product, and we've been able to do it without adding extra staff or equipment to do that.
All right, I think you heard earlier, I think Katrina visited a little bit about just the tremendous year so far that Basin Electric and especially Dakota Gas have been having financially. So let's talk a little bit with Dale about the financial strength there and what you've been seeing in 2022.
Thanks, Andy. I think first and foremost, I have to say how proud I am of our employees and how they've kept that plant running and getting those products to market. And then, you know, as Todd Tellez said in his speech, DGC's been very fortunate this year. Our commodity prices have been great, really, for virtually all of our products. So it's been a great year, and I think our guest speakers make me feel like that's going to be repeatable. But then, you know, really, it's our job, my job, to make sure that we're producing the products. And the plant really has run well. See the slide here, you know, where we finished, or where we are so far with regard to product versus budget. And the plant really has run well. It's really a testament to our focus on reliability and keeping things running. I think a couple things to point out in this graph. It actually shows that our natural gas was below budget, but that's really a good thing. We actually diverted more of our gas to the co-products, the fertilizers, the fuels that actually generate more margin than what we see with natural gas. And the other interesting thing about that is we have our firm transportation for the natural gas, so the marketing group has been able to optimize our revenues by utilizing that transportation. So you know, and it's just, you know, it really makes for great revenue streams. And then in this next slide, you can see that kind of combination of great prices, great production, really for all of our primary products, well above budget for gross revenue for the year. I think a couple of things to point out here. You can see that natural gas, SNG, is still a huge player in our business, but that combination of fertilizers, urea, ammonia, DEF, and ammonium sulfate's not on here, but that too, that combination of fertilizers is such a huge asset for the membership. Great revenue streams and just really tremendous business. And, in particular this year, a little bit earlier we saw the slides and the conversation about the storms that happened around our region this spring. And for DGC, one of the things that meant for us is it really delayed and sometimes canceled out the fertilizer season this spring. So our marketing group and logistics teams have really had to work this year to move that additional product and get it to those markets and still fetch a great margin. You can see good margins across the board. And then, one last point I want to make on this slide too, on the production. Just this week, the ammonia plant surpassed our previous record for annual ammonia production. So that just tells you that we're keeping that place running and running well.
Yeah, Dale, you guys have done a tremendous job out there. You've got far fewer employees, and you've just continued to just keep that unit running and had just a barn burner year. So I think myself and all the members appreciate that very much. So you mentioned fertilizer. Can you tell me a little bit about what is we hear about N7 relationship. Who is N7? Why are they important, and how does that play in?
So N7 is our relationship with N7, the marketing group. They market all of our fertilizers. So they get all of our fertilizer products, again, the urea, ammonia, DEF, and ammonium sulfate. They get that product from the plant to the markets. They do a fantastic job of making sure we have a good customer base. They optimize really the transportation rates. And as I mentioned earlier, this year was particularly challenging because they weren't able to sell as much fertilizer right in our region. They had to move further out. And even one other example of the customer base is the diesel exhaust fluid. That's been a phenomenal product for us. And N7 is moving that all the way to the West Coast, Washington, California. So great job of marketing.
Awesome. Well, we heard you talk a lot about high natural gas prices, and Val Weigel with our marketing group, their group keeps a sharp eye on all the commodities that the cooperative is exposed to. And Dale was just talking about high natural gas prices. Val, what are you seeing out there? We see that Dakota Gas obviously is a producer of natural gas, and Basin Electric is a user of natural gas in their generators. Can you tell us a little bit about that relationship and what you're seeing?
Sure. Well, you're absolutely right about high natural gas prices. Andy, we have seen an increase, and I think the previous presentation with Rusty Brazil, he provided a great background on what we're seeing in the commodity market. So to sum it up in a couple points, I think on the supply side with natural gas, when COVID hit in early 2020, we saw a reduction in production of oil and associated natural gas, and we have seen that slowly come back. On the demand side, we've seen many coal-based resources retire in the past 10 years due to different state requirements and economics from low natural gas prices for a long period of time. We've also seen a significant increase in LNG exports over the past 6 years. So those are two drivers where we're seeing an increase in demand for natural gas. So when we couple that slowdown in production and the increase that we're seeing in demand over time, and more U.S. gas moving into global markets, we are seeing much higher prices, and we're seeing much more volatility in natural gas prices. In fact, we've seen natural gas prices move up from an average of $1.85 in 2020 up to over $6 this year. So we've seen over a 300% increase in natural gas prices.
You know, $1.85 up to $6, I think there's a tremendous amount of analogies we could draw there. Anything from a loaf of bread to a gallon of milk to even probably diesel. All of us are feeling that. But, you know, as we see these commodity prices and all this volatility, Val, moving up and down, you know, and you see it at DGC, you see it at Basin, how does that all fit together for the membership?
Yeah. Well, we heard Todd mention earlier about the Pioneer Generating Station that we are working to bring online. And when we bring that on in 2025, as you can see on the chart in front of you, you can see how Basin Electric's natural gas burns are very equal to DGC's annual average production. Both are near 85,000 MMBTUs on average per year. So when we do see additional Basin natural gas burns, we do see increasing expenses for Basin Electric. But fortunately, DGC, like you mentioned, is a seller of natural gas as well. So when we see increased expenses for Basin Electric, we also see increased revenue for DGC from natural gas. And essentially, the entities act as a natural hedge and collectively provide risk mitigation for the cooperative.
Yeah, it's almost as if the cooperative owns its own gas field, isn't it? You burn, we just saw that previous slide there, you're producing gas and you're burning gas. Looks like those amounts are almost equal in some points in time in the near future here.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And fortunately for Basin Electric, we still have a large portion of our generating fleet that relies on coal for its fuel source. And what we see with coal for a fuel source is we know that coal price is known. We know that it's a stable price and it's not subject to the price movements that we're seeing in natural gas. Dale touched on earlier too, he touched on fertilizers, and we have seen natural gas prices impact our fertilizer pricing as well, coupled with N7 that was talked about a little bit earlier. So N7 is our joint marketing effort that we have in place with OCI, who's one of the largest fertilizer producing companies in the world. We've coordinated product sales and product movement with them over the course of this past year to create revenue opportunities for DGC.
So Val obviously is in our marketing group, but also there's a portion of her group that works on logistics. And so in order to get these products to market, obviously there's a lot of logistics pieces that go into place. And I think we got a short video here to talk about product movement and some of the things that we're seeing on that side.
So we move product two ways, which is rail cars. And with that, we have to coordinate with railroads, customers, to make sure that cars are getting loaded in time and shipped to customers and then returned in a fairly easy amount of time so that we can reload them and reship them for the sales purposes. As for rail cars, DGC does own a small portion of rail cars that we use for our dry fertilizers. And other than that, we get most of our rail cars from rail car companies that we lease them from. And we are constantly having to work with the rail car companies to stay up on leases, whether it's renewing them or ending them to find different cars or better cars. And then we also use railroad-owned cars, in this case usually the BNSF, and we use those to help move some of our dry fertilizer products as well. The other way that we move product is trucks, and so a lot of our trucks with fertilizers are all set up by N7. They coordinate the fertilizer truckers and get them to the plant. There are not a lot of drivers since the pandemic, so that can be a little bit of a hang-up, is trying to find drivers and getting drivers to the plant from depending on a long distance away.
So we often hear that there's a relationship between natural gas and power. We just got done talking about a lot of volatility in natural gas price. Can you tell us what you're seeing on the power side, Val, in relation to that?
Yeah, you're right, Andy. The natural gas high prices that we see in the natural gas market do flow into the power markets as well. Historically, there was a very strong relationship between natural gas prices and power prices, but With the onslaught of renewable generation that we're seeing in the market, that relationship is still there, but it's not as tight as it used to be. But what that creates is we see higher highs in the market and we see lower lows, and so we do see a significant increase in the volatility in the power markets as well. In the West this year, in the Western Interconnect, we do have more generation than we have load and contracted sales that we serve, so we are able to sell into those high prices in the Western market, so those provide a benefit for us. When we see higher prices in the Eastern Interconnect, we typically see our gas generation getting dispatched, and we are exposed more to market prices in the East, so that's a bit of a negative impact to us. But in total, we also have access to DC ties, which connect the Eastern and Western Interconnect, and because of that, we have the opportunity to move power from lower price areas to serve our load at the most opportune cost that we can.
So you mentioned markets, and I had heard that there was a new SPP peak sometime this year, and then also some things going on the west side. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what you were seeing there?
Yeah, you bet. It was another exciting year in the power markets. All the markets that we operate in are under tightening capacity positions, and what this means is that while market participants are obligated to bring enough capacity to serve their loads, we're seeing a lessening surplus of capacity in the markets than what we have previously seen. We're also seeing more dispatchable energy being retired and replaced with more intermittent resources, and this creates more time frames of high market prices or more volatile market prices. All of the markets that we do participate in are working on new rule sets to tighten some of the rules around capacity requirements. And additionally, in SPP, we did see a new peak load this summer. Throughout the month of July, SPP did hit 5 new progressive peak loads. At the time the peak load was hit on July 19th, about 85% of the resource base was dispatchable generation. And then in the Western markets this year in September, I think there have been a couple of references to this today, but we had a great week. We saw Western prices reach $1,000 per megawatt hour for nearly a week straight, and the teams at Laramie River and Dry Fork did a great job keeping resources online and reliable to provide the opportunity to sell into some of these high-priced markets.
Great. Well, then the day wouldn't be quite complete without hearing from Tom Christensen. Now, last year, supposedly, I had mentioned a comment about his incredible hairstyle. And this apparently was talked about quite a bit, but I did promise TC that I would not bring that up. I would not draw any attention to that. So we will not talk about Tom's hairstyle. So we heard a lot here from Val and some of the high markets. There's been a few things that you and I have talked about, TC, regarding resource adequacy and generation retirements. Do you care to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I sure would, Andy. Anyway, no, I think seriously, there's been a lot of discussion on the changing resource mix, and, that causes extreme concern. And so just, no discussion on operations really would be complete if we didn't kind of just take a step back and just talk a little bit about the fundamentals of the grid. And just, taking that step back and talking about it, the grid functions based on the laws of physics. And whether we're talking about the machinery in a coal plant, whether we're talking about the combustion physics in a combustion turbine, efficiencies of wind turbines, and all of the other components within the grid, they all function based on the laws of physics. And we as a cooperative, we as cooperatives, as an industry, we need to stress this issue. The laws of physics are immutable, they're non-negotiable, and they are not subject to any rules of man. We need to stress this and continue to communicate it, that if there is a conflict between the rules of man and the laws of physics will prevail every time. So let's talk a little bit more about just the basic operation of the grid. And the critical balance, if you will, between generation and demand. They need to be balanced, and it needs to be balanced all the time. If we're going to operate the grid reliably, we need to maintain that 60 hertz. And by the way, maintenance of 60 hertz and maintenance of that frequency within the grid is absolutely essential. And generation needs to match load. So, you know, as this scale shows, if demand exceeds generation, we have a drop in frequency. And it's absolutely critical that we maintain frequency. It's just simply not acceptable to have that. So just, you know, the short story is that the grid must have generation to meet demand under all conditions, and we need to continue to communicate this, that they need to match. It needs to be able to serve the demand out there, even if the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining. So I guess the message I want to leave, that we, you know, as we move forward, we as cooperatives, we as an industry, we as operators of the grid need to continue to meet demand with adequate generation. And that holds all the time. It must hold all the time, even if the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this critically important issue.
All right, thanks, Tom, for that deep dive into physics, and you're spot on. I think, you know, not that many years ago, we did a member survey where we asked for the key issues with the membership, and if you remember, that was affordability and reliability, and I think to what Tom speaks to here hammers that home. So now we talked a lot about physics. Tom, can you tell us a little bit more on the transmission side, what you're seeing over there?
Yeah, so, you know, we had a lot of discussion about operations here, and, you know, whether it's the generation, the marketing, the transmission, all those components need to work together to be successful. Transmission system really ties it all together. It delivers the generation to the load for our member owners. Our transmission system is highly reliable, and we take pride in our low forced outage rates. Unfortunately, sometimes Mother Nature intervenes. On June 11th, we had a weather-related outage on our Phillip to Phillip Tap 230 kV line. Then on June 14th, we had an outage on the Leos to Groton line, again due to weather. And then on July 18th, the Tioga to Saskatchewan 230 line was outaged, and again due to weather. And these outages were, you know, summer storm related, but even before then, in late April, we had an ice storm, and that took down a significant portion of the Bakken.
Thanks for bringing that up, Tom. I think we actually have a video that talks a little bit about what we saw there. It dives into, in this particular instance, Burke Divide and all the co-ops that band together to help pull things together at that cooperative and get power back up for the members at the end of the line. So let's take a look at that, please.
At one time, we had 10 lines out at one time. It's most I've seen in my career out at one time on the high voltage system.
Burke Divide went dark on the evening of April 23rd, and we were in the black for over 40 hours. First time in the history of the co-op that 100% of the system was in the dark.
After we got our stuff kind of put back together or patched up, then we started getting some requests in from the membership who got hit way harder than we did.
Conditions were so bad in our territory that we couldn't even get down the roads to see how much damage we had. We couldn't even, the snow was just too deep. We couldn't get down the roads.
Chris Baumgartner sent me an email, gave me a call, said, hey, you know, Jerry King's on the phone asking for some assistance, and you know, I'm gonna put him in touch with you. And I said, absolutely.
We reached out to Basin. We needed side-by-sides.
Said, yep, no problem, we'll have them delivered. So we sent, you know, a telecom technician and brought one from Minokan, and that same technician went up to Williston, picked up another one, dropped it off on the way back.
When I was going up there along the highway, a lot of the snow was well over the roof of the truck, and it felt like I was driving through a tunnel.
And the other godsend that we had was Basin was able to send a mechanic up, and we set up a mechanics shop in one of our outposts because we knew we were going to just bring an army of people up to help us.
Basin donated me to Burke Divide, so I packed my bag and took the service truck and headed up that way.
Our mobile mechanic was up there fixing things from contractors, from their crews. You know, anything that he could do to help out, he was there to help.
I was at the shop most of the time, so the electricians for Burke Divide were there, so if I wasn't busy, I'd give them a hand, and if I needed a hand, I could always go ask them and get a hand from them and everything. So
I could tell that they were in a dire situation of getting out and trying to get out to see what their lines were, the condition of their lines were. And that tracked vehicle really helped them get out there and assess the damage and get farther down the lines where their trucks and a lot of their snow equipment couldn't get to.
It's great to be a part of something like this when we're able to help out the cooperative family. You know, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of all the folks at TSM and the membership when they can all work together and accomplish something great.
So a big thanks to our transmission system maintenance group, and a big thank you to all of our cooperative brethren, especially those in the Basin family, but also, you know, to all the co-ops in the region. In light of these issues, cooperatives have stepped up to the challenge. We've worked together in delivering power to our member owners. Thank you to all of you. Also, very importantly, we owe a big thank you to Western Area Power Administration. Throughout the past decades, and even at Basin Electric's inception, this partnership with the federal government has impacted our member owners with positive effects on reliability and cost savings. Our relationship with Western continues to evolve, and this is particularly true when we joined SPP. But we continue to value this relationship as we coordinate on many issues, such as WAPA serving as our transmission operator for most of our facilities in the east. Additionally, WAPA administers our west side tariff. We work with us on transmission studies, transmission system maintenance activities, and so on. A sincere thank you to you, WAPA. And with that, I'll turn it back to the infamous Mr. Andy Buntrock.
I probably deserve that for sure.
And more.
And more, he said. His mic was off at the time, so. No, I wanted to just reflect on that video for a minute and just show and speak to a little bit of how that's so incredible to see that kind of thing and how the co-ops pulling together, especially in a time of need like that. And I also want to thank the panel here. You know, we covered a lot of ground today. We heard from Troy and how the plants are running, and those units have been just pushing hard. Despite some of those high market prices, we've been able to safeguard the membership, wall off the membership from some of those high prices by owning some of those units. Dale had enlightened us on what's going on out at DGC, some new products that are going on out there, kind of what led to a lot of the financial strength that we've seen out there this year, and that unit just running just spectacular. And then Val really dove into kind of what her group and her team is seeing out there in the market, and that volatility that you saw in so many graphs up here, both from Val and some of the speakers, and that volatility and that chop that your G&T helps pull out of there so that the members at the end of the line don't feel that as much. And then TC, of course, dove into some physics for us, told us about the importance of affordability and reliability, how we deliver that. And then, of course, we saw that great example of how cooperatives work together. So, and I think without further ado, I'd like to just thank all those employees out there. You know, whether it's an operator at one of the coal plants that's watching the boards, or even all the way out to the membership at the end of the line, one of the linemen that's out installing power on a new service. we all got to work together in order to get that power from production, generation, all the way down to the member at the end of the line. And I think that's a true award for a reward for what we do, and it's definitely why I work for the cooperatives. So without further ado, we could open it up for some incredibly hard questions for our panels here. And so there's less of us here, so we're going to have to each ask more questions than what we kind of thought initially. Oh, there we go. We got 2 of them even.
Thanks. This question might be for Tom. This is Dave Charles with Capital Electric, by the way. Tom, you know, a couple of years ago when we had that actually was outages where WAPA was tripping loads for shortages within SPP. If we have another condition this coming winter where Little Rock is short, would we expect loads up in Culbertson and Central Power being tripped in North Dakota? Have they solved that, you know, share the pain philosophy because of deliverability?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Dave. So one of the philosophies, and we even had this discussion even before this winter weather event, in the event of a generation inadequacy, you know, what's the method for curtailing? Is it resources per load serving entity compared to their load? And part of the issue in the market operation is that there may be units that are decommitted on a day-ahead basis. So, so you can envision that scenario where you decommitted my unit, we get into real time, all of a sudden there's not enough generation, and you're curtailing, you know, my load because I'm short if you did it on an LSC basis. So the philosophy that's been followed, good, bad, and different, is that to kind of socialize that, because you might have decommitted somebody's unit. So to be fair to that entity, it's been on a pro rata across the footprint. I think there's been some progress made in that if there are localized areas where there is you know, a generation to load mismatch and you can't get the power in from other areas, you would target that certain area for load reductions. But in general, the same pro rata sharing occurs. Now, as to whether it's going to occur sometime in the future, whether it's, you know, during a winter weather event that we might be having here, or something down the road where, you know, like happened back then, gas well freeze-offs in Texas, et cetera, you know, will it ever happen again? Well, if we continue down this road of turning off generation that's dispatchable and retiring those units, I think the odds go up. So that's a little bit of the reason I got into that laws of physics discussion, is that I think there's a real concern out there, and we have to continue to talk about that as co-ops, as an industry, to try and fix that basic issue. I think the communication process is going to be better if that would ever happen again, but I don't think there's any guarantees that it won't happen again. Hopefully it's done in a more coordinated fashion. I hope that it helps answer your question, Dave.
Other questions? For our panelists. I have a stack of reception drink tickets that I will give you for a hard question that you could potentially use next year if they didn't look at the date on there. So
they're not last year's tickets, are they?
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. I wanted to thank our panelists again for taking the time out. I can tell you these are incredible people that have incredible people that work with them to ensure that we deliver the value to you as the members at the end of the line. And then I also wanted to just thank you for coming to your annual meeting. So with that, I think we'll close the panel. Thank you.